We already have 6 teams who have had to go to their backup quarterback for one reason or another, whether it's been injury, poor performance. There's been a few guys on the hot seat, and teams are trying to make changes. But is it going to be like Russell Wilson to Jackson Dart? Does Jackson Dart take off for the rest of the season? Or is it going to be like playing games, Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins? Hey, we'll toss Cousins out there for a little bit, but you better believe Michael Penix will be right back out there next week. Whatever it may be, NFL teams are trying to throw some curveballs. So let's figure out which quarterbacks have the best potential in Week 4. For Seattle and Arizona on Thursday Night Football, Sam Darnold didn't look great in Week 1, but he keeps progressing and he's gotten better each of the last 2 weeks. And at the end of the day, there isn't a ton of us that are relying on Sam Darnold to be fantasy relevant. As long as he's getting Jackson Smith-Njigba all the targets that he needs to be fantasy relevant, no one's going to be upset with Sam Darnold. Realistically, he's a fringe start on Thursday Night Football, but really only for 2 QB and Superflex leagues. I already talked about this a little bit with Kyler Murray last week, and it's the fact that he's not putting up a ton of rushing yards right now, so his ceiling is a lot lower. And now he's getting Seattle, allowing the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. I think his ceiling is definitely low once again this week. The question is, who do you have that you could play over him? In a 1 QB league, you might have plenty of options. In a 2 QB or Superflex league, you don't. He's starting regardless. Minnesota and Pittsburgh will be over in Ireland this week. It is a 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time kickoff. And when I mentioned the kickoff time, my friends in Hawaii wanted me to remind everybody that they're getting up at 3:30 a.m. to watch the game. Props to them for staying committed. And also, can I just say, we have a lot of subscribers from Hawaii, which is absolutely awesome. And I always have a blast talking to them. I don't think I've talked to anyone from Hawaii who just doesn't love life. Carson Wentz looked great last week. So did the Minnesota offense. And you got to wonder, how long will he stay in place as the starter? It's going to be at least a couple of more weeks while JJ McCarthy is healing up. So Carson Wentz is going to have a little bit more time to make a case as why he should stay as the starting quarterback. And last week he went 14 of 20 for 173 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. And in this matchup, he's probably going to be a fringe top 12 quarterback. I don't think he quite makes his way into the top 12. I do think he could be right around 14 to 16 though. For Aaron Rodgers, I'm not going to start him this week, and I've seen a decline in his play each week since week 1 when he just wanted to get his revenge going up against the New York Jets. But now he gets the Minnesota Vikings, currently allowing the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game. Over the last 3 games, he went from 244 to 203 to 139 passing yards. He's thrown 3 interceptions over the last 2 games, and this is a way tougher matchup than the New England matchup last week when he didn't even have that good of a day. For me personally, when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, I think he should be on the bench this week. For Commanders fans and fantasy owners alike, seeing Jayden Daniels back at practice on Wednesday is something that you love to see, but he is still limited, and there is still no word on whether or not he will suit up going up against Atlanta this week. And Atlanta's defense has been fantastic to start the year, currently allowing the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. Now, Mariota looked solid last week. He had a couple of touchdown passes, but this matchup is going to be way more difficult. So if it is Mariota going once again, I don't want to go this route with him because the upside just isn't going to be there. If Jayden Daniels comes back, he's got to be a start. He was a guy that was drafted as a top 3 or a top 4 quarterback. And for those of you that were missing him last week, you were probably scrambling to find a replacement, and you probably don't have somebody that realistically has a better upside than what Jayden Daniels does anyway. Now, Washington is currently allowing the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. But don't let that overshadow the fact that Michael Penix just hasn't been it yet this year. Now, Raheem Morris in his post-game presser made it known to everybody, Michael Penix is the starter. Kirk Cousins is not taking over. But how long does that last? You've had a lot of troubles on defense, and you have been trying to improve it for a couple of years now, and you finally did. If Michael Penix isn't getting the job done, there is no reason to leave Kirk Cousins on the bench. Because for as bad as Kirk Cousins was at times last year, he could still end up being an upgrade over Michael Penix. And you may need to give this offense a shot in the arm. Am I the only one that thinks it's crazy that Spencer Rattler is a fringe start right right now, he hasn't been out of this world good, but he has been solid to begin the year. Spencer Rattler's been a QB2 every game this season. He's thrown for over 200 yards every game. He only has 1 interception, and he's thrown 4 touchdown passes. Is he a guy you're starting as your QB1? Absolutely not. But for those of you in Superflex leagues that unfortunately maybe missed out on another starter, Spencer Rattler could be your QB2, and you're probably not going to hate the points right now. Josh Allen, no-brainer. New Orleans currently giving up the 7th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. So if you have Josh Allen this week, congratulations. You might have the QB1 overall by the time the week is done. The Lions defense got to Lamar Jackson 7 times this past week. I'm sorry, but sacking Lamar Jackson 7 times in a game is very hard to do. And now they get basically the complete opposite of Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco, who isn't getting out of the pocket and escaping any sacks this week. The reason that I still have him listed as a fringe start and I don't hate the game more than what I do is the fact that Detroit gives up big plays in the secondary. It's what happens when you play man-to-man and you really bank on getting pressure on the quarterback. Are they going to get pressure on Joe Flacco this week? Absolutely they will. Will they get to 7 sacks? Maybe, maybe not. But there's going to be a few times in this game where Joe Flacco is going to let it sling, and when he does, he's going to find Tillman or he's going to find even Judy, potentially Njoku for a big play, and it could be just enough to have him just inside the top 24 quarterbacks. We know that Jared Goff can give you some of the highest highs at the quarterback position, but also he's a guy that will play towards his floor a lot more often than what we would like. The big difference is the splits home versus away. When he plays at home, he's always much better. When he plays on the road, he's a little bit more of a game manager at that point, like we've seen so far this season. Last time they were at home, a couple of weeks ago though, it was a huge week. 23 of 28 for 334 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. This week, his ceiling is going to be just as high. Maybe not that high, but should be a top 12 quarterback. I would like to list Bryce Young as a fringe start quarterback. He definitely throws the ball plenty of times for that to happen, but we're seeing some wildly big inconsistencies right now. In week 2, he was the QB8, and that's what you would hope to see is somewhere around 8 to 12 on a more consistent basis. But then in weeks 1 and 3, he was the QB 25 and the QB 25. He's not even startable in Superflex leagues 2 of his 3 games this season. And that's why this week, going up against New England, Bryce Young should probably head to the bench. If you own him in a 1 QB league, I would find another option. If you own him in a 2 QB or a Superflex league, I would try to play somebody that has a little bit more upside on a consistent basis until Bryce Young starts to be more consistent. I know that Carolina is currently allowing the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. I'm still starting Drake May this week. He's been the QB3 and the QB6 each of the last 2 weeks. And I know this is a tougher matchup, but over the last couple of weeks, Drake May has 17 rushing attempts. That's where he could make a difference this week, is using his feet. Will he be okay through the air? Probably. Will he have a ton of upside through the air? Probably not. But on the ground, adding in some rushing attempts and maybe even a rushing touchdown, he could find his floor pretty easy. Justin Herbert had a pretty tough matchup against the Denver Broncos last week and still threw for 300 yards. Now he gets the New York Giants, allowing the 10th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. Fire up some Justin Herbert this week. The rookie Jackson Dart is going to get the start, and I'm a big Jackson Dart fan. He is a guy that early in the evaluation process for me when looking at rookies, I told a lot of people in Discord that this guy had QB1 potential in this draft class, and I felt like he was going to be drafted over Shedeur Sanders. That doesn't sound like a hot take now, but I can tell you back in January, it absolutely was. But Jackson Dart is a baller, and he is a very good quarterback, and he showed some great tendencies while he was at Ole Miss. I think he's going to have what it takes to be a starting quarterback at the NFL level, and I think he's going to be very good, and he's exactly what this New York Giants offense needs. But the Giants continue to ruin players. And unfortunately, because of that, I don't know what we're going to get out of Dart this season. Could we get a NFL Rookie of the Year candidate? Absolutely we could. Could we get a guy that looks like a complete bust? Absolutely, we could. So because of that, for now, even though I'm super excited to see Jackson Dart, I wouldn't be trying to roll him out there in fantasy. Finally, Jalen Hurts gave us some decent upside last week. Through the first couple of weeks of the season, it was run, and he wasn't really finding his upside through the air. And he did last week finally, and now he gets the Tampa Bay Bucks, giving up the 9th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks on the ground, through the air. It doesn't matter. Jalen Hurts every single week has a super solid floor. It's just how often are they going to run the football that will predict how often he's a top 3 quarterback. Baker Mayfield more than likely was drafted as a top 5 or top 6 quarterback in your league. So if that's where you drafted him, you probably don't feel great about the ceiling that he's had so far. But from a floor standpoint, he's been the QB 12, 15, and 8. It's hard to find consistency like that right now. So if you own him and you don't love his upside, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Go ahead and just enjoy the floor for the time being. He'll find more upside later in the season as all of his wide receivers heal up. When you've got Mike Evans, Emeka Egbuka, Chris Godwin on the field, when Bucky Irving has an offensive line in front of him that's not all banged up right now, this offense is going to get better, and Baker Mayfield will look way better from a fantasy perspective as well. From just a pure NFL standpoint, Baker Mayfield deserves to be in the MVP conversation right now. Cam Ward is still fairly good as an NFL quarterback, and I had a back and forth with a couple of different people last week because I said Cam Ward had been good so far this season, and they were like, no way, like he has sucked for fantasy. And I get that, but once again, there's a difference between being a good NFL quarterback and being a good fantasy quarterback. And right now, Cam Ward isn't a good fantasy quarterback. He's just not. He's still very young in his career. And when you take a look at the weapons around him, they're underwhelming for the most part. And because of that, he just doesn't have that great of a ceiling, and his floor isn't nearly as high either. Cam Ward is going to continue to progress. He'll look good. You'll enjoy watching Cam Ward play football for the next several years. This year, though, from a fantasy perspective, nothing to see as of yet. How do you even start CJ Stroud right now? I mean, and I'm not just talking about this week, going up against Tennessee, allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, but how do you start him at all? How do you start him in a super flex league even? And we're talking about a guy that was NFL Rookie of the Year and the next big thing at the quarterback position. I'm a guy that has dabbled in trading cards a little bit, and we've done breaks on the channel and things like that and had some fun with it. And CJ Stroud cards were astronomically high because everyone was buying into him after that rookie year. And since then, he hasn't been anything. He's been short of mediocre at this point. So far this season, he's finished as the QB 26, 23, and 23. You barely can start him in super flex leagues right now, and this week he has a tougher matchup. I'm not starting CJ Stroud. I'll consider it in better matchups, but they've got to figure out what's going on in Houston. He's the QB4. The QB4. Do you know how many times we have made fun of Daniel Jones over the last couple of years here? It's been a lot. And we're not doing it because we don't like Daniel Jones, and we're not doing it to be mean. We like to have fun around here, and Daniel Jones has been the butt of many, many jokes since becoming the quarterback in New York. But kudos to him. I love a good comeback story. And the fact that Daniel Jones is the QB4 after being run out of New York, after being blamed for all of the problems, after fans absolutely torched this guy for the contract he got and because they didn't pay Saquon Barkley. Whatever it is, the dude has figured it out. Congratulations to him. Does it last? Maybe not. Maybe you enjoy this short ride while you have it. But Daniel Jones, my God, you have proved us wrong so far this season. Keep doing your thing, my man. Keep blowing up. Keep having good games. Lead the Colts to the playoffs. Whatever it may be, keep showing those haters, which include myself, how wrong we were. Matthew Stafford is going to be on the fringe for me this week. I don't think he has a ton of top 12 upside going up against Indianapolis because they're currently allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. And Stafford has not been a top 12 quarterback yet this season. But like I mentioned when talking about Cam Ward, like I mentioned when talking about Baker Mayfield, there have been some quarterbacks this year that are playing very, very well, but they're just not putting up a ton of fantasy points. And that would be Matthew Stafford. This is a little bit of a tougher matchup because he hasn't had the ceiling this season so far. In 12-team leagues, where you only start one quarterback, I'm probably looking for somebody else this week. In a Superflex league, I'll start him as my QB2. I'm sorry, but Trevor Lawrence and Jacksonville need to clean it up, and they need to clean it up fast. And maybe they need some help cleaning it up, because that's exactly what our good friends over at Caddy Splash do. When you're out on the golf course and your clubs are looking worn down, covered in grass, you don't want to do that. Your golf game already may be disastrous to look at. Don't let people look at your clubs and think that you're some amateur out here that only pulls his bag out once a year, even if you are. And right now, you can get 15% off your entire order over at caddysplash.com by using code HEADLINERS. And I'll tell you what, I haven't been able to get out on the golf course yet this fall because I just haven't had any time between coaching and between my work and my kids. I just don't have the time to golf right now. But when they sent us some samples to show us what their stuff was like, I took it out and used it on my clubs, and I loved what they offered. So if you're like me and you live somewhere where you're gonna have to put the clubs up soon, then get on over to Caddy Splash, get some of their tools to help you clean up your golf clubs, and you'll love the way they look when you take them out next season. If you live somewhere where you don't have to put the clubs away, then you better have them looking good all year round. An even bigger reason to head over to Caddy Splash. At this rate, Trevor Lawrence might want to invest in a good set of golf clubs because if he doesn't fix things over the next couple of years, this dude might be regulated to a backup role because he does not look like a number one overall pick right now. This week he gets San Francisco, allowing the 9th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. I mean, not good news because I don't want to make it sound like that, but good news for Trevor Lawrence. He doesn't have to worry about Bosa this week because Bosa's done for the season. But he's been the QB 23 and QB 28. Only one time has he been a top 12 quarterback so far, and even then it felt like a very underwhelming performance. The offense just doesn't look good right now. Is it Trevor Lawrence? Is it because they're trying to figure out the new offense under Liam Cohen? What's going on with Brian Thomas? Where's Travis Hunter? Lots of things going on in Jacksonville right now, and they've got a lot of work to do. So I left Mac Jones as a sit, and I put Brock Purdy as a fringe start because it does sound like Mac Jones is going to miss some time. And it sounds like Brock Purdy is making his way back for week 4. But I don't know if I want to play Brock Purdy this week. It is a fringe start for me going up against a Jacksonville defense that has been pretty solid so far this season. They're allowing the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers, even though they're averaging almost 15 fantasy points per game allowed to quarterbacks. So they are keeping the ceiling down on opposing QBs. And with Brock Purdy being back for the first time from an injury, I would rather try and go with somebody else this week because I think the ceiling is low and the floor isn't nearly that high either. What do we even want to talk about here? Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, they're both going to be starting quarterbacks this week. If you own either of them, they're in your lineup. Lamar Jackson looks fantastic. He's an MVP candidate once again. In fact, this dude has 9 touchdowns and 0 interceptions to start the season. Looks great. It's unfortunate his team is 1-2. I mean, they could be 2-1 and still would have lost to Detroit. I would have been fine with that. And for Patrick Mahomes, they're going up against Baltimore, currently allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And Jared Goff didn't even do that much against them last week. It was all on the ground. That just shows how many yards and how many points they've given up to quarterbacks so far this season. Now, Patrick Mahomes has reached his upside in each of the first couple of games because of the fact that he ran the football a little bit more often. Last week, he didn't really do it, so you didn't see that ceiling with him. This week, super solid floor. I think he does need to get out of the pocket this week, and when he does, he'll reach that ceiling once again. Caleb Williams had a great matchup last week and took advantage of it. A top 12 finish for him, and this week, going up against Las Vegas, which should be another beneficial matchup, he should be inside the top 12 again. Hopefully he keeps it up. For those of you that own Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, I don't know if you're going to try and bank on Cole Kmet this week. I wouldn't do that. I would not go that far. But even Caleb Williams himself, if you've been waiting to start him, last week and this week, great opportunities. Last week, without CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott still threw for 251 yards against this Bears defense. They're allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game, and Geno Smith is averaging 35 passing attempts per game right now. Listen, I didn't see that coming. Did not see the passing volume coming for Geno Smith with Ashton Genty and then a guy like Pete Carroll running the show there. So, hey, Geno Smith is an absolute volume hog right now. So if you can start him, this is a good matchup to do it. Caleb Williams just burned this Dallas defense last week. Jordan Love is going to look to get back on the horse. Dallas currently allowing the most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Jordan Love hopefully throws for at least a couple of touchdowns and goes well over 200 yards. However, Dak is going to be a fringe start for me, and it's him and the Dallas Cowboys that are going to control the upside for Jordan Love. It sounds like Dallas will not have CeeDee Lamb this week, and there's been some mixed things in the media about that because CeeDee Lamb told everyone he was going to be good to go. Jerry Jones said that he's probably going to be out for 4 weeks. Then Stephen Jones was like, we hope he's out there for Green Bay, but we're not 100% sure. Okay, keep it all to yourselves. I don't care at this point. It's a tough matchup. Even with CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott probably would have been a fringe start. Without CeeDee Lamb, he definitely is. I've been trying to record this segment for like 5 minutes, but my dog is laying on the ground behind me in his beanbag chair. Yes, he has a beanbag chair, snoring relentlessly. So if you hear that in the background, my apologies. But for as loud as he's snoring right now, I really hope that this game isn't a giant snooze fest this weekend. Will Justin Fields be back from his concussion? If he is, he's got a great matchup. Miami's allowing the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Tyrod Taylor, I don't know if he takes nearly as much advantage of that as Justin Fields would if Fields were to play. And the Jets are allowing the 8th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, but Tua is Tua. He's a fringe start because we haven't seen his ceiling this season as of yet, and it feels like it's been a while since we've seen his ceiling. But I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this game feels like it could go one of 2 ways on Monday night. It's either going to be like a high scoring affair where the defenses just play like garbage the entire time and the offenses take advantage of it, or it's going to be a mess on offense and it's going to be like a 13-9 game and we all have already switched to the other Monday Night Football game pretty early. There's no reason to even think about risking it with Jake Browning this week. Denver's allowing the 8th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Jake Browning is not the guy this week. The only hope is that he gets enough volume out to Chase and Higgins to make them fantasy relevant, which absolutely can happen at the quarterback position. If Jake Browning throws for 180 yards, 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions, that could still be more than enough for Ja'Marr Chase to have 80 receiving yards and a touchdown. And if that were to happen, then Ja'Marr Chase is absolutely a start. So just because you don't start a quarterback and you hate a matchup for a quarterback doesn't mean that their wide receiver or wide receivers could be fantasy viable still. I don't feel like Bo Nix has really got going yet this season, but going up against Cincinnati this week, he's going to have that opportunity on Monday Night Football. If he can find his ceiling this week, he's probably going to be a top 12 quarterback. If he doesn't, he still has an opportunity to be just on the outside looking in. Headliner Nation, start and sit videos are in the books for the week. If you are a new viewer here, please go check out the other start and sit shows that we've done this week. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about them? If you are a new viewer here, let us know what you think about the format, the analysis, and if you'll be back to watch again next week. Make sure you leave a comment down below, subscribe if you're new, turn on the bell notifications, think about joining and becoming a member, all of that good stuff. And make sure you check out all the ranking shows with Brad later on in the week to just verify if there's been any changes and find that updated information. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.